Welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to continue our series on how to edit in Lightroom. Let me hear you cheer. Excellent. Let's jump straight on with the video. Okay, my previous videos on how to Lightroom, I've shown you how to edit and different tips and tricks. One other thing that is missing from these videos is how to import a photo. So I'm going to show you that right now. Now what we do, we go down to the bottom left hand side of our Lightroom, click import. Now what we're going to be looking at is finding where our photos are. Now you could be on your desktop, it could be from your removable drive in your camera or your SD card. And it will be listed here in the import tabs at the side. So I know mine is in a folder called Woburn in the H drive. So I go to Woburn. Now it's in a subfolder called Photos, and what this will do, it'll bring up all the raw images from Woburn taken that day. I have it written down here on a piece of paper which one it is. So first off, I don't want to import all of them. If you did want to import all your photos, you click down here in the bottom right hand corner, import. Now the ones I want, it usually does give you a preview of them. But the one I'm looking for, 101. So first off, I'm going to uncheck them all, just so we don't accidentally import them all. So let's do 983, which is that one there, and click that one. Let's have a look at that one, and that's the one I'm looking for. So we've got this photo of a deer taken in Woburn. We're going to import it now and then edit. So I'll come back to you as soon as it's imported. Okay, so we've imported the image there into Lightroom, and we have these tabs at the top: develop, map, book, slideshow, etc. Now we're going to click on develop, and that's going to open up our editing tab and give us all the functions to edit this photo. And there we go. Now we begin editing. Now the first thing I do, if you've watched any of my previous tutorials on Lightroom, if you haven't, make sure you check out my channel. I've got few different Lightroom tutorials on it. First thing I do is always change the profile to Adobe standard, just like so, and that brings it back down to a nice starting point. Now our white balance, my initial thoughts are it's a little bit on the cool side. Now if we had something white in the image, we could use this pinpointer here and click on something white. But as you can see, we've got nothing white in this image. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to eyeball it and just go off what I feel is right. Now the best way to do this is to just move the sliders until you feel it's right. And there we go. Can you see how that's casting a blue tint? If I lower the temperature or raise the temperature, we can either go from warm to cold. And if we use the tint, we go from green to magenta. Now this particular image, I'm going to raise it just a very fraction, a little bit warmer. And that to me is much better already, and that's what I'm going to start working with. The other thing I'm going to do is come up here to a crop overlay, and we're going to crop this image in a little bit. I'm not happy with the composition, I'm a little bit far out. Now if you hold down left shift, it maintains the ratio of your image. So hold down left shift and it will maintain ratio. If you let go of left shift, you can pull it anywhere, but left shift maintains that ratio for you. I'm just going to get the deer centered for now, just like so. Then we click close, and that's a lot better already. What I'm going to do, I'm going to press Ctrl+ and zoom in on the face of the deer and just check my focus is correct. At the minute it looks like the focus is probably around the neck of the deer, which is going to be a little bit disappointed if it is, and we may need to alter the sharpness on his eye. Now it does look a little bit, looks like the focus area was on his body rather than his face, so we may need to do a little bit of sharpening on that in a moment. Okay, Ctrl- to zoom back out. Now my exposure is, if you go to the top up here, we've got a histogram on Lightroom, and this is our light areas to this side of it, and this is our dark areas, and everything in between is a mid-tone or between light and dark. Now just naturally looking at our histogram here, it's more favouring towards the darks, so I'm just going to raise the exposure just slightly, not by much, maybe 0.4, And there we go. It's just pulling it back into the middle. That way I'm going to be able to stretch the colours and details out a little bit more of this image. Now the contrast, I'm just going to raise that a little bit and just see how I feel about it as I'm moving up and down the slider. What I'm doing is eyeballing the image as I move up and down the slider. What I tend to find is there's a point where the image will just pop or flick over from. You just notice when it changes right too much, and you can tell, but there's a point either removing contrast or adding contrast that will look right to you, and it's homing in on that point of where it looks good to you. Now I'm raising my contrast, it just looks good about +10. I'm not going to go too much on that because we're going to use the highlights, shadows, whites and blacks now to really pull out the contrast. Now the highlights, as I've said in all my other tutorials, a lot of people lower the highlights and raise the shadows, giving you a kind of HDR look. Very processed look in my opinion. I don't really enjoy that, but what I'm going to do, start with the highlights, and we can lower the highlights, and you can see it just brings out a bit more detail in the grass down here at the bottom of the deer. So we're going to lower that slightly. And would you Adam and Eve it with almost at 100? I'm just going to lower it slightly. And now the shadows, got to be careful of this, we don't want to blow out our highlights. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom in with Ctrl+ again, and just keep an eye on his fur as we move the shadows, just to see if we can pull out some of the darker areas on our subject. You see it around here as I raise that, just pulling it out, and about 72 there. Ctrl- and it brings us back out to original size. Now the whites, if you've watched my other tutorials, very easy. Press and hold down left Alt key, and then begin to raise the white slider until your black screen starts to show some white dots in it. And just there you can just see, hopefully in the middle of the screen there, you can see that we're just getting a few white dots appearing. I'm just going to bring them back just slightly, just so they're hardly noticeable. So there we go, the white balance is correct. Now the blacks, we're just going to press and hold down left Alt key again and slowly lower our blacks until we begin to see our blacks coming through on our image. Now if I lower it all the way down and let go, you can see that we've over dark and crushed them blacks. So I'm not going to go all the way down, I'm just going to raise it slightly. I do like to add a little bit more black than I do like to crush them blacks a little bit. I think it does do something to the image, in my personal opinion. And remember, this is down to personal taste, personal preference. You do what you feel right. Don't let anybody tell you what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing. There's no right way or wrong way to edit a photo. Okay, so we've done the blacks and the image. Let's have a look quickly how this is panning out before and after already. So there's our before. We've got like a blue tint on it. Now it's looking much better already with our colour balance, and we're bringing out some of the details on the grass down here and on our deer. Press Y again and it brings back to our main subject. Now texture, I'm going to zoom in again and just check the fur or hair on this deer as I raise the texture. And again, you're looking for that point where it just switches over from being too blurry to being right. As you move the slider up and down, you're looking for that point where it switches to being correct, and then you lower it back down until it's just on the edge. You don't want to go too much because it's going to be really noticeable. So all I'm doing is sliding it and just looking till it pops over from being original, being slightly fuzzy, to clearer, giving us a bit of presence in our image. Now, as I said before, the texture slider here, this affects all the finer details, so the hairs on this deer will become a lot more finer and a lot more clearer. Now the clarity, this affects the medium to large details in our image, for example the trees in the background or the body of the deer. So we'll do the texture first. This is the finer details, +30. Now I'm going to zoom out to about there and now use the clarity, and you can see as I raise that what it does. Keep a look on the background here as I raise and lower that, and just the edge of our deer is becoming a little bit more apparent as well. Now if I lower it, obviously we lose all that clarity, If I raise it, we gain clarity. That's just about finding that point where it switches over from being what's the opposite of clarity? Let me know in the description. So we're just looking for that switch point on our slider as we move it. It's about there, about plus 32 with the clarity. Now our dehaze, if we lower it, obviously it adds haze, and if we raise it, it removes haze. Now, don't really want to raise it that much. Look what it does. If we put it at plus 100, you can see that it's really overdoing it, overkill. So if we just raise it a little bit, and we're looking for that point on the slider where it just switches over. It's about there, plus 11 on the dehaze. Now vibrance and saturation, I'm just going to zoom out so I get the whole image because we've got quite a lot going on in the background. Now the vibrancy, we can raise up a little bit. It's important not to overdo this. A lot of people whack up the saturation and vibrance in their image and it just looks a mess in my opinion. Really have to control your saturation and vibrancy. What a lot of people do is plus 20 on the vibrancy and then lower the saturation down to about minus 20, like so, and that actually looks pretty good. I'm just going to press Y again and we'll have a look at before and after. Okay, if we press Y again, we come back out and we can carry on working on our image. So there we go, we've done the basic tab now, and we can close that down. This is our starting point now. So we've altered the image to get it to a good starting point. Now the next thing we do is go into our tone curve, just like so. And what we're going to do is move the sliders left and right until we feels right. Now there's no right or wrong way to do this. As I said before, don't let anybody tell you what's right or wrong. Just do what you feel's right. Now sometimes we get in the habit of changing it for the sake of changing it, but don't do that also. Just go with your gut instinct, and if it doesn't need changing, don't change it at all. I'm just going to raise it by plus 3 on the highlights. Now we go to our lights. I'm just going to keep that very plus 1 maybe, very small changes. Now our darks. And again, I don't want to alter this too much. And our shadows, it's just affecting the background as shadows. Can you see that as I lower our shadow, it's affecting the background, so I've got to be careful there. I might lower it a bit more just so our deer pulls out a little bit. Okay, so that's our tone curve done. Let's close that down, and the image is looking wonderful. Let's go to our detail now, and this is our sharpening. So we're going to want to zoom in with Control Plus. Let's have a look at this deer's eyes. Now unfortunately it looks like our focus point was probably here. It's probably hit just slightly wrong, but let's raise the sharpening. Now you can press left alt, hold it down, and it'll change it to black and white, and sometimes that helps you in looking where the sharpening's right. You're looking for that point again at where it switches. Don't go, as soon as you go over it, drag the slider back down to the least amount you can get away with. So if I whack it up to 100, obviously that's well sharpened, but now I'm going to bring it back until it's at that point where it just switches over from being a little bit blurry to being perfect. About there, 95, 93, let's go a little bit higher, 95, excellent. Now our radius, as I've said before in other tutorials, what you want to do is imagine you've got a grey sheet and you're going to go up to this deer and tension the sheet, get 2 people to hold it and pull it around the deer. So as you raise our radius, if I press left alt again and then begin to slide up our radius, you can see that the image of our deer is coming through the sheet if we're putting tension on the sheet. Now again, what you want to do is get it to the point of where you can really begin to see the deer coming through. You don't want to go past that point though. So as soon as it comes clear, you release. So in this particular example, 2.2. Now detail is the same thing. We're going to add the grey sheet again by pressing left alt, and then we're just going to raise it up until the point, there we go, 54 on our detail. Now if I zoom out, Control minus, now that's looking pretty good. We've already sharpened up his face so much. It's really looking sharp now. Now our masking, what's going to happen is if we hold down left alt and begin to slide, it will change the image white. That means the whole image is getting sharpened, which we don't want. We only want the outline really of the deer and some of the grass in the foreground. So let's raise it, and you can see as I begin to slide the slider how it's changing to the outline of the deer. Go right to the other end, we're just getting the grass and the deer. I'm just going to bring it back slightly, just ever so slightly, probably 90, and there we go. So everything in the background doesn't get sharpened, only this foreground element and our deer is getting sharpened. Now noise reduction, we would look in the sky, but we've got no sky in this picture, so I'm going to press Ctrl+, look in the background. Now obviously we're zoomed in here about, what, 400% or 200%, and we're just going to raise the noise reduction until we see it go. Now the thing with noise reduction, if you look at the deer, as we raise the noise reduction, it's also affecting our deer. It's going to affect everything. So what we're going to do, we're just going to get rid of the noise in the background, then we're going to left alt on our detail. We're going to try to maintain the detail on the deer. So if we look at the deer over here, by raising or lowering this, we can get a little bit more detail retained in the deer. Now it's a balancing act between losing the noise and losing the sharpness on the deer. So play around with both of them until you feel it's right. Now one of the other ways of doing it is zooming back out and checking the whole image as well, because when you're zoomed in like that, you're really going to notice the noise. A bit further out though, you're not going to notice it. So always come down to a point where you're happy in the main image. Now we're going to retain that detail on that deer like so. Just going to zoom in again, Ctrl+, and we're going to do the contrast on the noise reduction. And this is a tricky one to actually get right. Loads of people don't do this properly. Keep a look on the deer and you can just see it's changing the contrast between the noise and not. So I'm just going to leave that about halfway. Now colour and detail, we can move them about as well and see how that affects our image. I don't very rarely touch those though, and so far that's looking wonderful. If we compare it to the original, let's have a look again. So there's our original on the left hand side, very blue, slightly, wouldn't say it's out of focus, but it's not as sharp as it could be. This is looking much better. Look at that under his neck there with the white fur or hairs under his neck. Got cool antlers, eh? Let me know what deer this is in the comments below. Anyway, so that's the detail. We press Y again and we go back to our main image, close the detail down. Now we're going to go into our HSL tab. Now this stands for hue, saturation and luminance. I'm going to open this over here. Now always start with saturation. Now one of the cool things about this is this image, we've got clearly defined colours here. We've got green for the grass and the branches in the background, and the deer is going to be like red, orange and yellows. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to try and desaturate the grass and just see if that brings the deer out a bit. We might be able to get a cool effect here. Can you see that? By lowering that green, we're not affecting the deer at all. We're only affecting the grass, and I really like that effect that it's got done. Now if we alter the yellow as well, we're going to remove some of the yellow from the grass because we've got some like straw hay type grass in. But we might lose some on the deer itself, so we're going to have to be careful with this. I'm just going to have a look. About there is about right. It's all down to personal choice again, what you feel is right. So don't ever feel like what you're doing is wrong. If you want more yellow and you want more saturation, whack it up and don't be afraid of doing what you feel is right. My personal taste though with this image, I want it looking natural. So I'm just going to bring the saturation down of the yellow as well. Now the orange might affect our deer. If you look on the back here and the shoulders of the deer, you can see it's just making it pop. So I'm not going to change that at all. And the reds, let's have a look at the reds. Again, it's affecting the shoulders. And we've got, it looks like there's a little bit of blue or something coming through on the deer. So I'm just going to check our blue. Oh, it affects something there in the background. We'll have a look at the aquas as well. Maybe the magentas. Oh yeah, there we go. The magentas is affecting the deer. So just going to lower them slightly down. The purples as well. Now that's looking really fantastic in my opinion. just mess around with your HSL tab, do what you feel is right. Start with the saturation, have a mess around, then what I do is go on to luminosity. Now this is how deep or how light our colours are. So if we go to, say, greens, which is the grass areas, if I want them lighter, I up it. If I want them darker, I lower them, and it gives it a really stylistic look to it. Now I really like that going down, even though it makes the grass look a bit greener. Quite like that, that's a different texture now to the dim. We'll move along with the magentas, and all I'm going to do is go up and down each colour until I feel it's right. And everything there in the luminosity tab I've made darker just to bring it out a little bit more. So we may look at going back to our basic tab in a minute and just raising our exposure. If you look up here in the top left, we're slightly crushing our blacks now just because I've changed our luminosity to a bit darker. Now our hue is the last thing we alter, or in my opinion we should alter. So what hue does, it changes how bright. For example, if we take this green here, we go to the green slider. If I move it to the left, it changes it more yellow. If I move it to the right, it changes it more blue. And you get that colour indication on the slider. So if I lower that down to the yellows, that was quite nice there. Now with our oranges, we can raise that up so it's more red. I think I'm going to leave the hues as they are. I'm really liking this slightly desaturated look on this image, so hues are completely fine. Next we go into colour grading, and if you've not seen my previous tutorials on this, basically we have shadows, midtones and highlights. Each colour wheel, if you move it around, so this is going to affect, this is the midtones up here. If I move that around, it's going to affect all the midtones, which is pretty much all the image in this case, because our midtones, there's a lot more midtones than darks. So you've got to be very careful with this, you don't want to overdo it, adding too much green or blue. And if you double click, it brings it back to the middle, he says, as it doesn't do it. The way I like to do it, I just look at the image and just move around slowly. Now that orange was really nice there, it complemented the deer very nicely. Now if you hold left shift, you can slide the orange up more or less very precisely without turning or rotating the tool round the wheel. So I'm just going to settle on about there. That looks really nice. And what we can do now, this is to lighten or darken that orange that we've applied. So we can darken it, or we can lighten it. And we've got to be careful, this affects our histogram at the top, so just don't overdo it again. Key to this is just being very gentle with everything. It's kind of like an artist painting with a paintbrush. You don't want to get a wall painting brush and just slap it on. Just use a fine brush and just take your time. Now the shadows, again, we're just going to go around and just see what works. Now sometimes going in the opposite direction, for example, we've used an orange here, so maybe a light blue might work. Now don't feel you have to use everything. Like I said before, if you don't feel it's working, leave it alone. You don't need to touch it. Once you find a colour though, see, I might even go slightly red and then turn it down. Actually the yellows and orange in the shadows are looking quite nice as well. So I may just put that roughly where our midtones are as well, and then just use the darken or lighten tool again to fade it in or fade it out how I like it. Now our highlights, this is going to be all the bright areas in the image, which is our grass, the deer's back, etc. Got to be very careful we don't overdo it again. And a little bit of blue, I'm just going to counter the orange and the yellows with a little bit of blue there. I'm just going to make that come alive a little bit. Now blending is how harsh they mix, how harsh the shadows, midtones and highlights mix. So move the slider up and down and you'll see it affect the image just ever so slightly sometimes, but it definitely affects it. I quite like it, a quite high 70 there. Now balance, again, this is one of my favourite tools. If you've watched my previous videos you know that. And this we'll pull our histogram about and decide where the shadows come in, where the midtones and where the highlights come in. So let's do that now. And again, what I find with this is one way will feel right and the other way will feel wrong. If I go to the right with this slider, it feels wrong. It comes a lot green, a lot blue. So our highlights are overtaken. If I go slightly the other way to the left, now that's really, really improving the image. It's making it look like it's in a wood, giving it a browny tint, and that's absolutely awesome. Let's have a look at the before and after. And there's our after, and there's our before. That almost looks like it could be hung up in a pub, that does, doesn't it? So there we go, we're almost there now. So we've done the color grading, we've done the tone, done basic detail, lens correction. Let's just go to profile, make sure it's enabled. So this is going to remove any warping from our lens, if there should be any. Let's remove chromatic aberrations as well. And finally, what I'm going to do on this image, and this is down to personal taste, some people like to do this, a lot of people don't know, is add a bit of vignette in. Now if I raise it to the right, it adds a white vignette, and if I go to the left, it adds a black vignette or a darker vignette. So I'm just not going to overkill it here. I'm just going to go -23. And our midpoint, if you slide the midpoint, you can see how it's affecting the roundness of our vignette. And then the roundness as well. We've got the roundness. So how round do you want it? Do you want it oval or do you want it round? Again, +11. What I find with vignetting is it really pulls us into the image and pulls us towards that subject. Feather. It's how much of a feather we want on the vignette, and about 47. How much highlights do we want? And there we go, that's looking pretty pucker. Okay, so we've nearly finished this photo and it's looking absolutely amazing. Now just before I show you the before and after, I'm going to give one of you guys the opportunity to have your photo edited by myself in Lightroom on one of my videos. Now all you have to do is give this video a big like, write a comment why it should be your photo, and if you read the pinned comment, it will give you all the instructions how to get your photograph to me. So let's jump back to the video and see the before and after of this Lightroom edit. Let's go. So here's our before photo. As you can see, it's very flat with a hint of blue over it, and let's see how we edited this photo. And there you go, that's how Lightroom edit. We've brought out all them yellows and golden colours, made it look a little bit more natural and woody there. Now I hope you agree with me, this looks so much better. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and like I said, if you want your photo featured in one of my videos, make sure you read that pinned comment. Make sure you subscribe to the channel also, because in my next video I'm going to show you how to save money on expensive camera lenses. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, guys.